There's a lot going on this time of year at the Idaho State House. Committee meetings, bill proposals, and key debates that could shape Idaho's future. I'm James Dawson, state government reporter for Boise State Public Radio, and I spend my days from January to April sorting through the action at the legislature so you don't have to. Sign up for my weekly newsletter, Legislative Roundup, and you'll get each week's biggest news and developments from the session delivered straight to your inbox every Monday morning. Sign up for Legislative Roundup at our website, boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudet. You're listening to Idaho Matters. It's been more than 2 years since the killings of 4 University of Idaho students in a Moscow apartment. Now, much of that time has been spent in court as attorneys have been fighting over what evidence can be used in the case. Bryan Kohberger is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder after his DNA was found at the crime scene. He is a former Washington State University graduate student, and if he is convicted, he could face the death penalty. So we wanted to get an update on how this case is going. So joining us now to talk more about this is Kevin Fixler. He is the investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman who has been following this case. Kevin, nice to have you on the show.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So Kevin, first, can you just give us a quick overview of the case? Take us back to November of 2022 and what we know happened the night of November 13th.
Sure. In the early morning hours, there were 4 University of Idaho students who were stabbed to death and not found for many hours into the next morning. Police arrived and confirmed the incident. The university was pretty close-lipped about information about how this happened. It took several days for them to acknowledge that these were homicides being investigated as a crime. Ultimately, that did happen. The police chief, after several days, held a press conference. There was a 7-week manhunt, it turned out to be. Several states involved, national in scope, involved the FBI, Idaho State Police, and Moscow PD. And they ultimately arrived at Bryan Kohberger, arrested him on December 30th of 2022 at his parents' home in eastern Pennsylvania.
So since then, Kevin, there have been several things happening in court, really over the last couple of months in particular, including the defense trying to exclude some evidence. So what did they want to throw out exactly?
Yeah, so since November, Bryan Kohberger's attorneys, the public defense team, has filed to suppress evidence, which is a standard process in, murder trials, certainly. And the evidence in particular that they were looking to have thrown out and not available to the state to present before a jury was related to DNA found at the crime scene on a knife sheath for a combat-style knife that was found at the crime scene, according to police. In addition, they were looking to throw out, as a result, many other pieces of evidence because of a DNA process that the FBI used to land on Kohberger as the prime suspect. But in addition to that, there were, digital accounts, everything from his Amazon purchases over the last handful of years to his AT&T cell phone account, a variety of things there. In addition, any evidence that was found at his apartment in Pullman, as well as taken and seized from his parents' home in eastern Pennsylvania, and also from his car, which is a white Hyundai Elantra that police allege was seen on several videotapes, both around Pullman and also near the crime scene from some Ring cameras.
Can we go back to you mentioning this knife sheath that was found in the apartment next to one of the victims, I believe, and it had Kohberger's DNA on it. Why is that so important to the case?
Well, you just said it. Police allege, and prosecutors, obviously, as part of that, say that it's Kohberger's DNA. We have, I would say, to the extent we can, and know that it is touch DNA, meaning it's something along the lines of a skin cell that was found. Not to get into too many specifics, but there's a button snap attached to this knife sheath for a K-bar knife, and that's believed to be the murder weapon, of course, based on 4 individuals being stabbed to death. And They ran plenty of tests and confirmed it by DNA that was taken from a trash can at his parents' home, and then ultimately a direct match to Kohberger through a cheek swab when he was arrested, and then also when he was brought to Idaho. So that's been doubly confirmed, both by Pennsylvania and police and FBI, and then also with the Idaho police. And it's the one thing that appears to tie him to the crime scene. His defense attorneys have said repeatedly that he has no connections to the victims. No blood was found in his car. No blood found in his apartment. Again, according to the defense and what they have said both in court records and also in the court during hearings. And so it seems at this point, and again, there's probably evidence we're not aware of yet, but at this stage of the game, this is all that we know that does tie Kohberger allegedly directly to the crime scene.
So, Kevin, there was some interesting information that came out in court recently, and this was blood found at the crime scene that is not Kohberger's and apparently belongs to two other men. There was a transcript recently released. So, can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so last month there was a hearing for the defense to challenge various pieces of evidence. And part of their argument was that there wasn't probable cause for various search warrants, and they sought a specific hearing in order to try and challenge that evidence directly. Judge Stephen Hippler in Ada County ultimately denied that. But part of their argument was that the magistrate judge up in Latah County, where the crime occurred, was not given sufficient information by police, and the defense alleged that this was intentional, it was reckless, and it was an omission that affected her ability to determine probable cause appropriately, which ultimately led to the search warrants and ultimately Bryan Kohberger's arrest warrant as well. The blood, we know from one of these transcripts that was just released on Friday from a closed hearing, was a spot of blood that police found on a handrail within the home between the first and second floor is sort of the new detail that just came out. And then additionally, there's another unknown male DNA sample of blood from a glove that police found during the investigation outside somewhere outside the home. And so police ran the DNA from the sheath through the CODIS system, which is the national forensic DNA. And they did not get a hit for the knife sheath DNA, which they prioritized. Obviously, you have 4 stabbing victims, and then you find a knife sheath. So that was their priority. And then they also were not able. They actually didn't run the other 2 blood samples through CODIS because you have to meet certain criteria according to the FBI and understand that it's the presumed perpetrator. So those 2 blood samples were not run through the system. Ultimately, it was investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, that was used in order to establish who the alleged owner of the DNA on the knife sheath was. And the defense has argued that had the magistrate judge in Latah County been aware that these other 2 blood samples were at the crime scene and police did not pursue those to the fullest extent, that perhaps she would have made a different decision about probable cause. Judge Hippler argued otherwise and ultimately sided with the state in allowing that evidence to remain in the case at this point.
Okay, so that evidence will remain as part of the case right now. These 2 other unknown blood samples.
Well, so I was referring to the knife sheath DNA, but certainly certainly the defense will be attempting to bring up the additional DNA from the crime scene that police ultimately did not identify, almost certainly at trial, to raise questions about reasonable doubt with the jury.
So I want to go back to something you said a little bit ago, and this is the fact that Kohberger's defense team has said over and over again that there's no connection between Kohberger and anyone at the apartment. In fact, his defense team has also argued that no blood was found in his car or at his apartment. How important is that to the case as well?
Well, it goes toward the defense's arguments that there's no connection. He wasn't the person. He's innocent. He should be acquitted, and it will be part of the legal strategy, no doubt, from his defense team to argue once again that he had no connection to this crime. And I'm sure they will try to find a way to explain away how an item that seems to match that of the murder weapon, which to date we don't know if that's been discovered. But if if that's the only thing tying him there, they will need to find a way to explain how that particular item could end up inside the home. And as you pointed out, next to and including halfway under one of the four victims.
So DNA is incredibly critical in this case, as we've been talking about, Kevin. And you recently reported in just the last week that Kohberger's legal team got a bit of a shakeup. They added some new attorneys who specialize in DNA evidence. Tell us about this. And is a change like this unusual?
I'm not an attorney, but I do speak with plenty of legal sources, and my understanding from not only people who are following this case, but also defense attorneys in the field, they tell me that's not a particular shock that they would look to change up their lineup, I guess you could say, at this stage. Not having any success with trying to suppress that particular evidence means that they're going to now have to strategize around it. And the change that took place was one of the public defenders who's been with the case essentially since it started, a North Idaho attorney named Jay Logsdon. He is stepping away from any sort of trial responsibilities, and the attorney they're now bringing in on the defense is a DNA specialist who was a San Francisco public defender. Sort of interesting, she actually has testified in the case on behalf of the defense already during a hearing in August of 23 about the DNA evidence and kind of the process of investigative genetic genealogy, which is a mouthful, but something that I think many will either be familiar with, and certainly by the end of this trial, anybody following it will be familiar with that term. But clearly, they're going to need to strategize around what will be presented at trial, and as you've pointed out several times, it does appear to be the critical piece of evidence at this stage.
So, Kevin, there was a gag order put in place on this case quite a while ago, even before there was a change of venue to Ada County. So the trial will be happening in Ada County. I'm curious, though, with that gag order in place, what is that for folks who may not be aware, but also how has it made it reporting on this case? How difficult is that?
Yeah, so the original judge, actually the magistrate, issued a non-dissemination order immediately following Bryan Kohberger's arrest. Several media outlets, including the Idaho Statesman and Boise State Public Radio, challenged that in court, but ultimately it remained. The judge that followed, the district judge, John Judge, yes, his name is John Judge, he reissued the same order with some minor tweaks, but for all intents and purposes, it remained. And it remains today, even as you pointed out, the case was moved to Latah County out of concerns about a fair trial. So in terms of reporting, it restricts anybody involved in the case, including agents of the defense and prosecution, from speaking outside of the court record. That essentially means that they can't do interviews, they can't speak publicly, they can't answer questions specific to the case, so as to prevent information that we don't know about, that wasn't included in the probable cause affidavit or the search warrants that have been released or outside of the court record, making its way to the public and potentially affecting the ability for Bryan Kohberger to obtain a fair trial. It is a bit of a challenge. Just think if the police chief or FBI agents were able to answer questions and tell us more about what they found, when they found it, how they went about their investigation, that would make for a pretty interesting read. And as a result, people like myself and many reporters across the nation are left to attend hearings, watch them on the live stream, and also closely review court records in order to kind of find new details and new information. So to some extent, we're all sort of drinking from the same fountain. And I'd say that's been successful in keeping new details from leaking out. And yet, there's some questions as to whether or not that's appropriate for the public in the midst of a very public trial.
And at the same time, making sure that this individual does truly get a fair trial. And I think sometimes we forget that in the midst of such a tragedy that happened. And with that said, I'm curious about the fact that you have been writing a lot about this case, Kevin. What kind of feedback have you received from readers?
Yeah, just on your last point, I mean, certainly, and judges have to weigh, what the public should have access to with the rights of a defendant at a free trial. So that's certainly true and worth underscoring. Uh, you know, in terms of reader responses, this is a case of national scope and great public
Hmm.
interest. I hear from a lot of people on social media, through emails, tipsters, people who want to suggest a path to pursue. I mean, certainly there's sort of the online sleuth community who, did you look at this? And they're sort of doing their own investigations and also investigations of police and wondering about the process. So I hear from those types of people consistently. I hear from people who can't believe, the ways in which the coverage, not necessarily my own, but in general, beliefs that Bryan Kohberger is clearly guilty. And, what are we doing messing around with a presumption of innocence? Was certainly he is guaranteed. And that's our approach at the Statesman, no doubt. And I hear from others who cannot believe that he has been charged with this crime. And
Hmm.
he's certainly innocent, has, been a target of police. And, they believe firmly in his innocence. And, that's, I guess, why we go to trial in America, to suss out the details and allow a jury of our peers to make those decisions.
And speaking of juries, when will jury selection, at least when is it supposed to start? Because it will be jurors from Ada County.
That's right. The trial is scheduled for this summer, and jury selection starts on July 30th as currently scheduled.
All right. Well, Kevin, really appreciate all the reporting you've been doing on this. I know it is a big task. We've been speaking with Kevin Fixler, investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman, about the Bryan Kohberger case. He is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. We will, of course, link to Kevin's stories on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.